From Strength to Strength, Finding Success, Happiness, and Deep Purpose in the Second Half of Life by Arthur C. Brooks. Picture yourself on a red-eye flight, the cabin bathed in that eerie dim glow, while most passengers drift in and out of sleep. You're trying to focus on work, something pressing, when a whispered conversation from the row behind cuts through the silence. An elderly woman's voice, strained with frustration. "It's not true that no one needs you anymore." A man's mumbled response, barely audible. Then her voice again, sharper now, almost pleading. "Oh, stop saying it would be better if you were dead." Your heart skips. You're not trying to eavesdrop, but now you can't help yourself. Your mind races, painting a picture of this man. Maybe he spent his whole life working in obscurity, dreams perpetually just out of reach. Now, pushed into retirement, he feels invisible, useless. But then the plane lands, the lights flicker on, you glance back, and your entire imagined story crumbles. You recognize him instantly. He's famous, a genuine hero, someone you've admired since childhood, someone whose accomplishments inspired a generation. As he makes his way down the aisle, other passengers whisper his name with reverence. The pilot, standing by the cockpit door, lights up. "Sir, I have admired you since I was a little boy." And this man, the same one who moments ago seemed to wish he were dead, absolutely beams. He basks in the warmth of his past glory. So which version is real? The proud legend soaking up admiration, or the despairing soul whispering about death in the darkness? This haunting scene stuck with Arthur C. Brooks, a social scientist who, at the time, was riding high as president of a prominent think tank. He was in his late 40s, checking off boxes on his success list: best-selling books, speaking engagements, columns in the New York Times. By most standards, he'd made it. Yet something gnawed at him. He felt that relentless pressure to keep achieving, to keep climbing higher, but deep down, he suspected his own peak might be passing. Would he end up like that famous man on the plane, haunted by fading relevance, wondering if his best days were behind him? This question launched Brooks on an intense 9-year quest, diving into science, philosophy, history, and conversations with hundreds of people, searching for a roadmap through the inevitable changes that time brings. What he discovered forms the heart of this remarkably insightful book, From Strength to Strength. It's a New York Times bestseller that offers more than just career advice. It's a guide for finding not just success, but genuine happiness and deeper purpose, especially as we enter what Brooks calls the second half of life. This isn't your typical book about aging gracefully. It's about understanding the surprising shifts in our abilities and learning how to harness them. Brooks reveals a hidden pattern he calls the striver's curse, how the very drive that propels us to early success can lead to frustration and unhappiness later if we don't adapt. But here's the wonderful promise. There's another path. There's a way to move from one kind of strength to another, potentially even greater strength. By the end of our journey today, you'll understand the science behind why our abilities change, why fighting this change leads to misery, and most importantly, the practical steps you can start taking now, regardless of your age, to build a future filled not with decline, but with growth, meaning, and authentic joy. This isn't about fading away, it's about transforming. Let's start with a truth that might sting a little. Your professional decline is probably coming much sooner than you think. Arthur Brooks isn't being pessimistic here. He's just laying out the facts based on extensive research. We tend to imagine old age and decline as something happening way off in our 80s or beyond. But the reality, especially in high-skill professions, is quite different. Think about athletes. We understand they peak young, maybe early 20s for sprinters, a bit later for endurance athletes. No one expects them to compete at 60. But what about knowledge workers? The scientists, writers, entrepreneurs, doctors, lawyers, people who rely on intellect. We assume our mental peak lasts much longer, maybe into our 70s. The data tells a different story. Consider Charles Darwin. He revolutionized biology with On the Origin of Species, published when he was 50. A monumental achievement. Yet afterward his groundbreaking work slowed. He couldn't make the next leap, partly because the crucial discovery of genetics, made by Gregor Mendel, was published obscurely, and Darwin lacked the skills to grasp it even if he'd seen it. Despite remaining famous, Darwin spent his later years feeling unsatisfied, believing his best work was behind him. He confessed to a friend, "Life has become very wearisome to me, even though by the world's standards he had every reason to be content, successful by everyone else's measure, but feeling washed up by his own." Darwin's experience, Brooks reveals, isn't an anomaly, it's closer to the norm for high achievers. Research across various fields shows a distinct pattern. Professor Benjamin Jones studied major inventors and Nobel Prize winners and found the most common age for breakthrough discoveries is the late 30s. The likelihood of major innovation rises through the 20s and 30s, then drops dramatically through the 40s, 50s, and 60s. By age 70, the probability is near zero, similar to age 20. This pattern holds, with some variation, across many fields. Writers often peak between 40 and 55. Financial professionals? Peak performance hits somewhere between 36 and 40. Doctors seem to peak in their 30s, with skills potentially declining afterward. Even entrepreneurs, often celebrated for youthful success, tend to see their peak innovation by middle age. Scholar Dean Keith Simonton created models showing that, on average, creative careers peak about 20 years after they begin. If you start at 22, your peak might hit around 44, followed by decline. Brooks shares his own painful brush with this reality. As a young man, his dream was to become the world's greatest French horn player. He practiced relentlessly and, by 19, was playing professionally. But then, inexplicably, in his early 20s, he started getting worse. His techniques suffered. Pieces became harder, then impossible. Despite years of trying to reverse it, the decline continued. At 31, heartbroken, he admitted defeat and pivoted, eventually becoming a social scientist. Looking back, he realizes he was lucky. His decline came early, forcing him to find a new path sooner than most. So why does this happen? It's not simply about raw intelligence dropping off a cliff. A key factor involves changes in the brain, particularly the prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for focus, rapid analysis, and filtering out distractions. This area develops last in childhood and is among the first to show decline in adulthood. As it becomes less effective, usually starting in middle age, our ability for quick innovation and multitasking suffers. We become more easily distracted. Recalling names and facts also gets harder, not because the information isn't there, but because our brain's librarian gets slower and more easily sidetracked. For high achievers, this decline can feel devastating. Brooks introduces the principle of psycho-professional gravitation. The agony of decline is often directly related to how high you climbed and how attached you were to that success. Someone who achieved great fame or prestige often suffers more when that fades than someone who had a less prominent career. Think back to the man on the plane. His past glory seemed to make his present feel even more unbearable. Studies even show that people identified as highly gifted early in life can have lower psychological well-being later on, perhaps burdened by unmet expectations or the pain of falling from perceived heights. This is compounded by another human trait, our inability to savor success for long. We're wired as if on a, quote, hedonic treadmill. We achieve something, feel good for a moment, but then the feeling fades, and we need the next success, maybe even a bigger one, to feel satisfied again. So we face a double whammy. We need ever greater success to feel good, but our ability to achieve it, at least in the same way, is declining. Brooks calls it a triple whammy because this chase often leads to unhealthy patterns like workaholism, damaging the relationships that could support us when we stumble. We become terrified of decline, increasingly dissatisfied, hooked on past glories, and isolated. Faced with this reality, Brooks says we have three choices. 1. Deny it and rage against the decline, setting ourselves up for frustration. 2. Shrug, give in, and see aging as just a tragedy. 3. Or accept that the skills that got us here won't necessarily get us happily into the future, and start building new strengths. If you choose door number 3, there's a bright future waiting, but it requires a shift in thinking. This leads us to the heart of the book's solution, understanding the second curve. While some abilities decline, others actually grow stronger with age. Think about vocabulary. Older people often have richer vocabularies and are better at games like Scrabble. They also tend to get better at combining complex ideas, seeing patterns, and explaining things clearly. They might not invent the new thing, but they understand how existing things fit together and can share that understanding beautifully. This isn't random. It's explained by psychologist Raymond Cattell's theory of two types of intelligence. The ability that peaks early and then declines, the raw smarts, flexible thinking, problem-solving ability, Cattell called fluid intelligence. This is what drives innovation and fuels the careers of young killers in many industries. It's the first curve. But there's another kind, crystallized intelligence. This is the ability to use the knowledge and experience we've accumulated over time. It's our mental library, the stock of wisdom we build. Unlike fluid intelligence, crystallized intelligence tends to increase through our 40s, 50s, 60s, and often doesn't diminish until very late in life, if at all. Think of it this way. Fluid intelligence is about generating new facts. Crystallized intelligence is about knowing what those facts mean and how to use them. Young people have raw smarts. Older people have wisdom. This reveals a profound opportunity. If your career relies only on fluid intelligence, you'll likely peak and decline early. But if you can shift your work to rely more on crystallized intelligence, on teaching, synthesizing, mentoring, sharing wisdom, your peak comes later, and the decline is much slower, or may not happen in a meaningful way. The ultimate trick is to jump from the first curve to the second. Some careers naturally favor crystallized intelligence. Historians, for example, peak much later because their work involves assembling and interpreting vast amounts of existing knowledge. If a historian finishes their PhD at 32, they might still be doing half their life's work after age 72. Teaching is another prime example. Studies show older college professors often get the best teaching evaluations, especially in humanities, improving through their 60s and 70s. Their strength lies in explaining accumulated knowledge and connecting ideas, pure crystallized intelligence. This idea of shifting roles later in life echoes through wisdom traditions. Cicero advised that older people should reduce physical labor but increase mental activity, serving others through counsel and wisdom. Zen masters speak of transferring the spirit of the art from heart to heart, like lighting one candle from another. The value isn't just in creating new things but in illuminating others. Brooks argues that many fields, even youth-dominated ones like tech, desperately need this wisdom. Young innovators bring the fluid intelligence, but older mentors bring the crystallized intelligence, the experience, the perspective, the understanding of consequences that comes from having made every stupid mistake in the book. So the second curve exists. It offers a different kind of success, based on wisdom and sharing, which many find more valuable and meaningful than the relentless pursuit of the first curve. The challenge is making the jump. People often resist because they don't realize their first curve naturally bends down. They think something's wrong with them, and they don't know the second curve exists or how to get onto it. Brooks offers Johann Sebastian Bach as a beautiful example of someone who made the jump gracefully. Bach was a genius, a master of the high Baroque style, famous early in his career. But musical tastes changed. A new classical style emerged, championed by younger composers, including Bach's own son, C.P.E. Bach. Suddenly, J.S. Bach's Baroque music seemed old-fashioned. C.P.E. became the more celebrated Bach for a time. Instead of becoming bitter like Darwin, J.S. Bach took pride in his son's success and reinvented himself. He shifted from being primarily an innovator to being a master teacher. He spent his last decade creating works like The Art of Fugue, essentially a textbook designed to teach Baroque compositional techniques. He found deep satisfaction in sharing his accumulated wisdom. He died fulfilled, respected, and happy, having successfully navigated from his fluid intelligence peak to his crystallized intelligence strength. He jumped curves. Darwin, faced with a similar decline in his innovative power, became despondent. He never found or jumped onto his second curve. Bach did, and his later work as a teacher ultimately cemented his legacy even more profoundly than his early innovations. The secret, Brooks urges, is to get on your second curve. Stop fighting the natural decline of fluid intelligence and start cultivating and using your growing crystallized intelligence. But this requires overcoming some powerful internal forces that keep us chained to that first curve. The first major obstacle is success addiction. Brooks recounts a conversation with a highly successful Wall Street executive who was starting to feel her abilities slip. She admitted she wasn't happy. Her marriage was strained. She drank a bit too much, felt exhausted, had few real friends. When Brooks asked why she didn't shift focus to fix these things, she replied, "Maybe I would prefer to be special rather than happy." Anyone can do the things to be happy, she reasoned, but not everyone can achieve greatness. This hit Brooks hard. He realized she was describing an addiction. Just like someone might choose being high over being happy, she chose being special over being happy. This specialness was tied entirely to her professional success, her image. She had objectified herself, reducing her identity to her job title and achievements. Now that this identity was threatened by decline, she couldn't let go, even though it was making her miserable. This self-objectification often fuels workaholism. Brooks defines workaholism not just as working long hours. Many successful people do that and enjoy it, but by asking questions like, do you stop working only when you're completely drained, leaving nothing for loved ones? Do you sneak around to work? Does taking time off make you anxious, even when nothing urgent is happening? Workaholics, like other addicts, often prioritize their addiction, work, or rather the success it brings, over human relationships, leading to isolation and damaged connections. Underneath workaholism is often the true craving, success itself. The money, power, and prestige trigger dopamine, giving a temporary high. For some, this high masks underlying unhappiness or fear. Think of Churchill's black dog of melancholy, which he fought with obsessive work and ambition, or Lincoln's profound sadness, eased by relentless striving. The problem is, the high never lasts. The success addict needs the next hit, constantly chasing a satisfaction that remains elusive. This ties back to self-objectification. We learn it's wrong to objectify others, reducing them to a single characteristic like looks or wealth. But we easily do it to ourselves, defining our worth solely by our job or accomplishments. We become homo economicus to ourselves, sacrificing love and joy for the next achievement. When decline inevitably comes, this narrow self-definition leaves us feeling empty and worthless. This addiction is fueled by pride, the excessive desire for one's own excellence, and fear, particularly the fear of failure or disgrace. People driven by fear of failure often don't even enjoy their successes much. They're just relieved they didn't mess up. This often goes hand in hand with perfectionism, the belief that success means avoiding mistakes rather than achieving something good. Another driver is social comparison. Success often feels positional. We measure ourselves against others. This is a trap. As research consistently shows, social comparison lowers happiness. There's always someone richer, more famous, more powerful. It's a game you can't win, yet the urge to compare pulls at us relentlessly. These forces, self-objectification, workaholism, success addiction, pride, fear, social comparison, keep us chained to the first curve, terrified of letting go. To break free, the first step, like in any recovery, is admission. Brooks offers a quiz. Do you define your self-worth by your job? Quantify success by money, power, or prestige. Fear what comes after professional success. Plan to just work until you drop. Dream of being remembered for work. Answering yes suggests a success addiction. Recovery means admitting the problem and genuinely wanting to change, choosing happiness over being special, and embracing humility over pride. Brooks shares his own litany inspired by prayer, asking to be delivered from putting career before people, from the drive to be superior, from the fear of decline. Once you admit the addiction, the next step is to start chipping away at the attachments holding you back. Brooks uses a powerful metaphor inspired by Eastern art. Westerners often see art starting with a blank canvas, something you add to. Eastern philosophy often sees art existing within a block of jade. The artist's job is to remove what isn't the art, to reveal what's already there. Our lives, especially as successful strivers, are often like overgrown jade boulders, covered in accumulations, possessions, accomplishments, status symbols, opinions, commitments. We think happiness comes from adding more, the bucket list mentality. We want to see, do, and acquire everything before we die. Brooks argues this is a flawed strategy. It leads to materialism and vanity, obscuring our true selves. As Lao Tzu said, "Find simplicity, find peace." Instead of adding more as we age, we need to strip things away, to find our essential nature and jump to the second curve. This requires confronting our attachments, the things Thomas Aquinas identified as substitutes for God, or idols: money, power, pleasure, and honor, fame, prestige, admiration. These things aren't inherently evil, but when they become our primary focus, our idols, they never bring lasting satisfaction. We get them, we despise them, we seek more, realizing their insufficiency only after possessing them. The Buddha taught similarly. Suffering dukkha comes from craving and attachment to worldly things. The path to peace lies in eliminating this attachment. Modern science explains why these attachments fail us through the concept of homeostasis. Our brains strive for equilibrium. When we get a hit, whether from a drug, a success, or acquiring something new, the brain works to neutralize it, bringing us back to baseline. This is why the thrill fades quickly. Over time, with repeated hits, the brain adapts, requiring more stimulus just to feel normal and creating a hangover or withdrawal when the stimulus stops. This is the hedonic treadmill in action. Satisfaction isn't just getting what you want. It becomes continually getting what you want. Evolutionary psychology adds another layer. We're wired to want more, not just for survival, but for status, making us attractive mates. This drives the toxic social comparison game. Success becomes continually having more than others. And compounding this is loss aversion. We hate losing what we have even more than we enjoy gaining something new. Failure becomes having less, something we desperately try to avoid, especially as our abilities start to decline. These formulas, driven by dopamine, evolution, and homeostasis, trap us. They promise satisfaction but deliver only fleeting pleasure and growing anxiety. The path to lasting satisfaction, Brooks argues, requires a new equation. Satisfaction equals what you have / what you want. Instead of relentlessly chasing more halves the numerator, we need to manage our wants the denominator. As Saint Josemaria Escriva said, "He has most who needs least. Don't create needs for yourself." How do we manage our wants? 1. Ask why, not what. Identify your deep purpose, your why. What truly matters? This is the sculpture inside the jade. Shed the activities and attachments, the whats, that don't serve this purpose. Often a crisis like illness or loss forces this clarity, but we can choose to seek it proactively. 2. Create a reverse bucket list. Instead of listing things you want to acquire or do, list your attachments: money, power, pleasure, admiration. Honestly identify your biggest weaknesses, then visualize a future happy self, focused on what truly brings joy: faith, family, friends, meaningful service. Compare the emptiness of the attachments to the richness of these deeper goals, and consciously choose to detach from the former. Commit your energy to the latter. 3. Get smaller. Find joy not in chasing grand achievements, but in appreciating small, present moments. Be mindful, like Thich Nhat Hanh washing dishes, fully aware of the simple act. Brooks shares watching flowers bloom at dusk, a small miracle whose satisfaction endured far longer than many worldly accomplishments. Chipping away these attachments frees us, but another force often holds us back. Fear, especially the fear of decline, which feels like a kind of death. So the next step is to ponder your death. Many strivers adopt a rage against the dying of the light strategy. Work harder, deny decline, go until the wheels fall off. If your identity is fused with your work, I am my job, then professional decline feels like existential erasure. But raging doesn't work. Decline is inevitable. Only by facing this professional death can we defeat the fear that handcuffs us to the first curve. The fear of death, especially the fear of non-existence or being forgotten, is profound. We try to combat it by building legacies, hoping to achieve a kind of immortality like Achilles chose. But as Marcus Aurelius noted, most legacies fade. People move on. Your successor might toss your life's work in the dumpster. Obsessing over legacy also squanders the present. There's a better way to think about legacy, drawing on David Brooks' distinction between resume virtues, professional, comparative achievements, and eulogy virtues, ethical, spiritual qualities like kindness, love, faith. While resume skills inevitably decline, eulogy virtues can grow stronger throughout life, aligning perfectly with crystallized intelligence. Focusing on these brings inherent rewards and deeper fulfillment. To cultivate them, Brooks suggests a monthly practice. Imagine you have 1 year left to live and work. How would you spend the next month? What truly matters? This focuses you on the present and on what builds your best self. Beyond legacy, confronting mortality directly helps defeat the fear itself. This is like exposure therapy. Studies show people imagining death express more negativity than those actually facing it. Death seems scarier when abstract and distant. As Montaigne advised, let us have nothing more often in mind than death. Contemplating scarcity makes life dearer. Brooks adapts the Buddhist Maranasati mindfulness of death meditation to professional decline, envisioning stages from noticing reduced competence to being professionally forgotten. The goal isn't morbidity, but acceptance and freedom from fear. Facing decline and death is crucial, but unlike death itself, decline doesn't have to be experienced alone. This brings us to the next essential element for navigating the second half. Cultivate your aspen grove. Brooks uses the metaphor of aspen trees. They look like individual trees, strong and solitary. But underground, they share a massive interconnected root system. An entire grove can be a single organism. Similarly, giant redwoods, despite their immense height, have shallow roots that intertwine and fuse with others in the grove for stability. These trees mirror a deep truth about humans. We are profoundly interconnected. The idea of a completely separate self is largely an illusion. Trying to live as a solitary, rugged individual goes against our nature and leads to suffering. Recognizing our connection to others, our shared root system of family, friends, community, helps us navigate personal decline. My decrease is offset by others' increases. Their joys become part of my own broader self. This interconnectedness is also essential for the second curve. Wisdom, crystallized intelligence, needs an outlet, needs others to share it with. Unfortunately, many strivers neglect their relationships on the way up, leaving their root systems withered. They end up lonely. Loneliness isn't just being alone. Solitude can be healthy. It's the pain of feeling isolated. It's a major health risk, comparable to smoking and worse than obesity, linked to higher disease rates, cognitive decline, and shorter lifespans. It's an epidemic, especially among successful people. Lawyers and doctors top the list of loneliest professions. Leaders are particularly prone, as true peer friendships at work become difficult due to power dynamics. Subordinates may see the boss as just a dispenser of resources, not a person, while leaders may distance themselves to maintain objectivity. The antidote to loneliness lies in cultivating deep, authentic relationships, primarily romantic partnerships and close friendships. The Harvard study of adult development, tracking men for over 80 years, found the single most important predictor of happiness and health in old age wasn't wealth or career success, but the quality of relationships. As longtime director George Vaillant put it, happiness is love. Full stop. For romantic partnerships, the key isn't fiery passion, which often fades, but companionate love, stable affection, mutual understanding, and commitment, rooted in deep friendship. Regarding your spouse as your best friend yields the greatest well-being benefits. However, marriage alone isn't enough. Having at least one or two close friends besides your spouse is crucial for life satisfaction and resilience, especially during rough patches in the marriage. Men, in particular, often rely too heavily on their wives for emotional support, having let other friendships wither due to work. Building a network beyond the spouse is vital. Friendships with adult children, while valuable, often don't provide the same level of peer support and well-being as friendships with unrelated peers. This raises a critical question: do you have real friends or deal friends? Brooks shares his son, pointing out that many of his friends were just contacts for mutual benefit, utility friendships, as Aristotle called them. Higher are friendships based on pleasure or admiration. Highest are perfect friendships, based on shared virtue and mutual well-being, pursued for their own sake. Many strivers find their utility basket overflowing, while the perfect friendship basket is nearly empty. Having just one or two authentic friends is a powerful marker for happiness later in life. Rebuilding these connections, if they've withered, takes time and effort. If you feel you don't have time, it's likely a sign of workaholism needing direct address. If relationships are so damaged you don't know where to start, begin by articulating your desire for deeper connection. Consider parallel play activities like men's sheds, where people work on projects alongside each other, gradually rebuilding social skills. If past neglect has caused resentment, I doubt people would forgive me. Take inspiration from recovery programs, make amends, sincerely apologize, and back it up with changed behavior. Use exercises like Christensen's "How will you measure your life?" approach. Allocate time intentionally for relationships. Focus on meeting their needs, not just yours, and invest intelligently in their growth. Shift from extrinsic goals, money, power, fame, to intrinsic goals centered on relationships and meaning. These are strongly linked to greater happiness and well-being. Strengthening relationships provides the support needed for the next crucial step, the inner journey. Brooks advises you to start your vanaprastha. He draws this concept from the ancient Hindu theory of ashramas, or stages of life. Typically, life unfolds in 4 stages. 1. Brahmacharya, youth, focused on learning. 2. Grihastha, adulthood, focused on career, family, and worldly accumulation. The trap here is becoming attached to the rewards, money, power, pleasure, honor, and trying to stay in this stage forever, getting stuck on the first curve. 3. Vanaprastha, literally retiring into the forest. This stage, ideally starting around age 50, involves intentionally pulling back from worldly duties to focus on spirituality, wisdom, teaching, and mentoring. It's about developing spiritual skills and detaching from the idols of the previous stage. This is the metaphysical context of the second curve. 4. Sannyasa, old age, dedicated fully to enlightenment and spiritual realization. Vanaprastha is the crucial bridge. It's the training ground for the wisdom and peace sought in the final stage. Many people naturally feel a pull toward spirituality or deeper meaning in midlife. Theologian James Fowler found that while young adults might question religion's inconsistencies, Older adults often develop a greater tolerance for ambiguity and see beauty in transcendence. Research consistently shows that religious and spiritual adults tend to be happier, healthier, and less prone to substance abuse. Brooks believes this comes from shifting focus away from the self, me, towards something larger, the cosmos, truth, the good of others, which brings relief and proper context. This focus doesn't have to be traditionally religious. Philosophy like Stoicism can serve a similar function. However, strivers often resist this pull. Faith might seem unimportant during the climb up the first curve. Admitting a need for spirituality can feel like weakness. Brooks calls this the Nicodemus syndrome, after the Pharisee who came to Jesus secretly at night, afraid to openly question his established beliefs. Changing one's self-concept from non-religious to something open can be uncomfortable, challenging pride. The solution is vulnerability. Shift from none to none right now, cracking the door open. Another barrier is holding on to childish views of faith, Santa in the church. Adults should engage with faith traditions maturely, exploring the deep philosophy and scholarship within them, not dismissing them based on childhood impressions. Finally, there's the tyranny of time. Spiritual practice requires consistent effort: prayer, meditation, study, worship. It can't be a side interest. It needs to be prioritized like essential health practices. Brooks suggests pilgrimage, like walking the Camino de Santiago, as a powerful way to kickstart this journey. The monotony strips away distractions, fosters mindfulness, gratitude, and a focus on the present moment. Embracing this inner journey requires seeing vulnerability not as weakness, but as a new strength. This leads to the next principle: make your weakness your strength. St. Paul spoke of a thorn in my flesh, some affliction that tormented him, yet he claimed, when I am weak, then I am strong. This seems paradoxical. We're taught to hide weaknesses, especially professional decline. But Paul understood a deep truth: vulnerability connects us. Brooks shares his own story of hiding his non-traditional college background until outrage over elitism prompted him to write about it. Instead of derision, he received an outpouring of connection from others with similar stories. His perceived weakness became a bridge. Strengths impress, but weaknesses connect. Sharing suffering authentically, like Paul did in his final letters, makes leaders more human, relatable, and ultimately more effective. Defensiveness builds walls. Defenselessness builds trust. Furthermore, pain and loss aren't just things to endure. They can be sources of growth and meaning. Most people experience post-traumatic growth. Facing suffering can clarify what truly matters, as it did for Brooks's friend with cancer who found profound happiness in his decades after his diagnosis. Even negative emotions like sadness can have benefits, improving our assessment of reality and focus. Meaningful experiences often involve struggle. Facing smaller stresses builds resilience for larger crises. Beethoven is a stunning example. Going deaf should have ended his career. He raged against it initially, pounding pianos into ruin. But eventually, he adapted. As his hearing faded, he became less influenced by external musical trends and more attuned to the radical, original music forming within him. Completely deaf, he composed his most groundbreaking works, including the Ninth Symphony. His weakness, paradoxically, unleashed his unique genius. Embracing weakness allows us to connect more deeply, find meaning in adversity, and even discover new strengths. It also allows us to finally relax, to stop pretending, to be authentic. It's a superpower. Having done the internal work, kicking addiction, chipping away attachments, facing mortality, cultivating relationships, starting the spiritual journey, embracing weakness, you're ready for the final step, making the jump itself. Brooks advises, cast into the falling tide. He uses the metaphor of ocean fishing. The best time to fish isn't calm water, but the falling tide, when everything is stirred up, and the fish are biting like crazy. The only mistake is not having your line in the water then. The transition between the first and second curves, that period psychologists call liminality, is like life's falling tide. It's turbulent, scary, maybe feels like loss. But it's also intensely fertile and productive. It's when you make the crucial shifts. Seeing it only as tragedy is missing the opportunity. Transitions are normal, inevitable parts of life. Major life changes happen frequently. The discomfort comes from identity instability, not quite knowing who you are anymore. Brooks shares his own disorienting experience after leaving his think tank job. But the good news is, most transitions, even unwelcome ones, are ultimately seen as successful or net positives in retrospect. Painful periods often yield the greatest meaning. They can also stimulate creativity. As Emerson said, in his transitions, man is great. Does this transition have to be a midlife crisis involving dramatic destructive behavior like John DeLorean's? No. Research suggests the ubiquitous crisis is largely a myth. You can make a major life reset virtuously, like Brooks's grandfather moving his family with no job lined up but finding a fulfilling new path, or his father pursuing a PhD mid-career to pivot fields. These resets can bring you closer to loved ones, not drive you away. Resources like Chip Conley's Modern Elder Academy now exist to help navigate this phase, focusing on evolving mindset, openness, collaboration, and counseling. Brooks offers 4 final lessons for making a good transition. 1. Identify your marshmallow. Know what you're striving for in this next phase. What's the meaningful reward you're willing to work and sacrifice for? 2. The work itself has to be the reward. Don't repeat the mistake of treating work merely as a means to an end. Money, prestige. Find work that is intrinsically rewarding, aligned with earning your success and serving others. 3. Do the most interesting thing you can. Seek work at the nexus of enjoyable hedonia and meaningful eudaimonia. Deep interest holds pleasure and purpose. 4. A career change doesn't have to be a straight line. Embrace a spiral career path, shifting fields, building on past skills in new ways, prioritizing meaning over linear progression or external validation. Leaving the familiar first curve feels like standing on a cliff edge. It's a professional death before an uncertain rebirth. It's scary. But you know what you need to do. Don't overthink it. Jump. The entire journey Brooks maps out leads to a simple, profound formula for the second half of life. 7 words to remember. Use things. Love people. Worship the divine. This isn't about rejecting the world, but about right priorities. Use material things. Enjoy them, but don't love them. Love is reserved for people. And direct your worship not toward idols, money, power, pleasure, prestige, or yourself, but towards something higher, something transcendent. Break down the idols. By embracing decline, shifting focus from fluid to crystallized intelligence, kicking addiction, chipping away attachments, facing mortality, deepening relationships, embarking on a spiritual path, finding strength in weakness, and bravely making the transition, we can move from a strength that fades to a strength that grows, finding deeper happiness and purpose than we ever imagined possible. Arthur Brooks has given us something truly valuable with From Strength to Strength. It's more than just a self-help book. It feels like a wise, compassionate guide, whispering truths we might instinctively know, but often ignore in the relentless pursuit of conventional success. What struck me most profoundly is the clarity it brings to that nagging feeling many high achievers experience, that sense of dissatisfaction even amidst success, or the quiet dread of becoming irrelevant. Brooks doesn't just validate these feelings. He explains why they happen, rooting them in the predictable shifts of our cognitive abilities, the decline of fluid intelligence, and the rise of crystallized intelligence. Understanding this isn't depressing, it's liberating. It reframes aging not as simple decline, but as a transition with its own unique potential for growth and contribution. The concept of the second curve is incredibly hopeful. It tells us that our value doesn't evaporate when we can no longer innovate at the same pace. Instead, our accumulated wisdom, our ability to teach, mentor, synthesize, and connect ideas becomes our new superpower. This shift requires courage, though. It means letting go of the ego attached to the first curve's achievements, kicking the addiction to worldly validation, the money, power, pleasure, and honor that Aquinas warned about. Brooks's practical advice here, the reverse bucket list, focusing on why, not what, pondering our eulogy virtues, provides concrete ways to start loosening the grip of these attachments. Perhaps the most resonant theme, especially in our often isolated modern world, is the emphasis on relationships. The Harvard study's finding that love is the cornerstone of a happy, healthy later life feels like ancient wisdom rediscovered. Brooks pushes us to honestly assess our connections. Do we have real friends or just deal friends? Are we prioritizing work over the people who truly need us? His call to cultivate our aspen grove, to recognize our interdependence, is a powerful antidote to the loneliness that plagues so many, especially successful leaders. And finally, the call to embrace the spiritual journey, the vanaprastha, and to find strength in weakness, feels deeply countercultural yet profoundly true. In a world obsessed with projecting strength and perfection, Brooks reminds us that vulnerability connects us, suffering can bring meaning, and accepting our limitations can unlock new forms of growth, just as Beethoven's deafness arguably fueled his greatest creative breakthroughs. To apply these lessons today, consider these simple actions. 1. Honest assessment. Take Brooks's Success Addiction Quiz. Where do your attachments truly lie? Are you prioritizing being special over being happy? 2. Schedule connection. Look at your calendar for the next week. Where have you intentionally allocated time first for family or a real friend, not just squeeze them in after work? Block out 1 hour dedicated solely to strengthening a key relationship. 3. Identify one why. Spend 15 minutes reflecting on your deeper purpose beyond your job title. What is one core value or service you want to embody more fully? Write it down. How can you lean into this using your wisdom-crystallized intelligence rather than just your innovative power-fluid intelligence? 4. Practice defenselessness. The next time you feel criticized or notice a weakness, resist the urge to defend yourself. Instead, acknowledge it openly, perhaps even with humor. See how it changes the dynamic. This summary of From Strength to Strength by Arthur C. Brooks has hopefully given you a glimpse into its powerful message. We've explored the core ideas today, but honestly, a summary is just scratching the surface. The real transformation happens when you engage with the book directly, letting the stories and insights sink in at your own pace. If the idea of navigating life's changes with more wisdom, purpose, and joy resonates with you, I wholeheartedly encourage you to pick up a copy. Reading it isn't just about learning concepts. It's an experience that could genuinely shift how you approach your career, your relationships, and your future. You can find a link to the book in the description below. Also, if this journey through From Strength to Strength has sparked something in you, please show your support by hitting that like button and subscribing to Billionaire's Bookshelf. We delve into life-changing books like this regularly, and by subscribing, you ensure you won't miss our next exploration. Let's continue learning and growing together.